Another really important piece of information that needs to be accurate when we report it, or as close to accurate as possible, is information about hospital discharges. That had also not been reported to us. We've been pushing very hard with our partners, the hospitals, county public health, to make sure that there's a meaningful way to have this, a uniform comprehensive data set on each COVID patient that is hospitalized and then discharged. We believe that this information will be available to the public within a few days as it comes in. So certainly by the end of this week, that information will be available in a reliable way. After our conversations, I sent a letter last Friday to the hospitals talking about exactly what was needed, really commemorating that conversation. And we're now are putting a request in with HHS and FEMA to allow the reporting of this information. And as soon as we have that agreement from the federal government on reporting this information, it will be available to us and to the public. That'll be very important to see the pattern of who's hospitalized for not who by name, but how many people are hospitalized for 2 or 3 days, for 10 or 12 days, how many, the outcomes of which ones are discharged. So that will be available soon. That will also be broken down in ways that will allow us to make more informed information. I also want to provide an update on the JBS plant outbreak in Weld County. Was mentioned by the Vice President this morning on our call with the governors. I spoke with the Vice President 3 times over the weekend with the goal of the minimum disruption to our national food supply. How can we make sure that we can bring online our critical food security facilities like JBS as quickly as possible? And there's really a couple goals there. We also want to protect workers and staff. The Weld County community, we've seen, this has only been part of it. There's been a surge that we've seen in cases in Weld County. JBS is part of that, but it's beyond just JBS, but that contributes to the increase in the entire Weld County community. And then the goal of getting this critical part of our national food infrastructure online as sooner rather than later. And these two things are consistent with one another. Just as we talk about with the economy at large, the better job we do at staying at home and isolating, better hygiene, the sooner we can get the entire economy going. Our hearts go out to the families of the JBS workers who are among the over 300 victims in Colorado. 2 or 3 have passed from this deadly virus. JBS is closing the plant for a period of time. They're working with us, County Health in Weld County, Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, on communicating to their employees about a plant-wide quarantine and testing during this time to ensure that they can reopen as soon as possible. There'll be sanitization of the plant. There will be limited work happening with limited staff wearing appropriate personal protective equipment, but not at production capacity until we can work hard to make it reopen as soon as possible. And the way that we can bring the plant back online is not unlike any other critical part of our economy. It's mass testing, containment, to make sure that those who are sick are not coming to work, and providing protective equipment and masks to relevant employees and those who might have been exposed. Weld County Public Health and CDPHE are talking to JBS to design the aggressive testing and containment strategy so that they can continue as soon as possible and in as uninterrupted a way as possible the critical work with what the consumers rely on, as well as our ranchers. I've also prioritized the Colorado National Guard to provide logistical support for testing so that they can safely start up again as soon as possible. And of course, we also know that on the labor side, I asked the JBS impacted workers to be in touch with the Department of Labor and Employment to see what they can do during the time that they might be out of work, and they are working together to accomplish that. Some of you might have seen the mask that I came out with today. It's not a very exciting mask. It's just your basic white mask. And I think that we, as Colorado, can show our creativity a little bit in making masks a little better than this one. I'm sure you've all noticed there's a lot more masks being worn in public. That's really important. People need to stay at home whenever they can, unless you absolutely have to go out. And when you do go out, it makes a big difference to wear a mask. And this cultural shift isn't easy. It means change. Our kids now think the masks are fun and funny, but some kids might find it scary. Others might react in different ways. So we wanted to create a conversation around art and creativity to help alleviate these fears and really talk to children and others about difficult subjects and emotions and try to make it a little bit more fun. Designing masks together as a family can really open up that conversation and help children become comfortable with wearing one or seeing adults or their parents wearing one without having a fearful reaction. And it's, of course, a fun project that we can do at home. And today we are announcing the Colorado Face Mask Design Challenge, coloradofacecontest.org. And we're calling on kids across our state to create your own design for a face mask. And you can be creative, you can have fun. We're going to do it with our kids tonight, and we'll post pictures of that, and I know that you can too. You know, think about things like what or who would you like your friends to see on a mask. You can imagine yourself as a superhero. You can imagine yourself as a character from a TV show or book or a movie. Or just think of a silly face or emoji to draw on the mask. Maybe your school mascot. There's so many possibilities. The possibilities are as vast as the creativity of the children of Colorado. And I am so excited that in the future I'll hopefully be able to show and wear masks designed by Colorado kids rather than just this plain white mask. It's a tough situation that we're in. It's important to wear masks. Let's try to do the best that we can with it and really help address some of the fears people have around masks by trying to make it this part of it as fun as possible, as creative as possible. We're going to feature some of the submitted designs on Facebook and on Twitter, and we'll even print some of those designs from Colorado kids on real face masks produced by Colorado companies that will be manufactured at a larger scale and donated to this effort. So if you're watching at home, coloradomaskcontest.org. Goes right to the Creative Industries website. And I'm going to introduce Margaret Hunt, the Director of Colorado Creative Industries, who's going to go over the specifics around this challenge and how Colorado can rise to the occasion of successfully integrating masks into our culture in a way that fosters creativity and challenges kids to be able to come up with a way to make our faces a little bit more interesting and exciting during this time when we need to wear masks. Margaret?
Thank you, Governor. Margaret Hunt. I'm the Director of Colorado Creative Industries, which is our state arts agency here in Colorado. We do many things, including certifying creative districts across the state, which we have 26 now that are state certified. We also work with our artists and arts organizations to provide them with support. And during this time of challenging time, we have resources on our webpage, coloradocreativeindustries.org, to help artists and arts organizations access the kind of resources that they need right now. Additionally, we work with our public schools and our charter schools by providing arts education opportunities for kids. So, on to the design challenge. I want to recommend that design challenge guidelines are on our website. Those designs should be made within the parameters of the template that we provided. We're asking for kids to use bright colors. Markers work really, really well. And if you're using crayons, to use bright, bold colors and to fill in the blanks. I have an example of one that was done by a 12-year-old, and you can see that he used a very bold marker to do his design, and then it was replicated on an upscaled T-shirt that then he just puts over his head and wears, and it has a nice filter inside. So some great ideas on the online about how to make face masks if parents are interested in doing that. So once you make your design, take a photograph with your digital camera and upload it to our website. And what we're asking you to do is to name it, the first name of the child, for example, Jack_Smith.jpg, so that we can identify the child that is submitting the design or designs. We also ask that if you would, to include where you're located, because we'd like to see designs from all over the state of Colorado. And then submit your design to the Colorado Face Mask Challenge. We have a group of artists who are going to be going through those submissions and selecting a few each week for us to feature on our website. So thank you very much and have fun with this. We hope parents and kids have a great time.
So I know that Colorado can do better than this plain white mask. And remember, it also can be made out of T-shirts. You can start with a white or light colored T-shirt to be able to decorate and make that into a mask. And anything that covers your nose and your mouth and doesn't inhibit your breathing works as a mask. The main benefit of a mask is people, without even knowing or thinking about it, in the ordinary life are touching their nose or their mouth dozens of times each hour. The masks prevent that. They also do prevent the particles from flying in and flying out. And we have they've been recommended by CDC nationally, and we are strongly recommending in Colorado that people wear masks whenever they're out and about for an important part of preventing the spread of the virus. I know that this is a serious and concerning time, but the mask design challenge is a great way to get creative. And I've seen Coloradans do so many creative things, whether it's putting bears in their windows, whether it's kids who've decorated their sidewalk. We're seeing so many optimistic and fun signs of people making the best that they can with having to stay at home. I know that it's hard. We have an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old, and so we're in the thick of that. Some people have 3 or 4 kids. It's even harder. Others have people that they want to visit and have to forego visiting loved ones during this time. So we're all making sacrifices, but we're all doing it for an important reason. We're doing it because the better job we do staying at home, the shorter the duration of these measures will be, and the shorter the disruption of the economy will be. So we can get back to earning a living, supporting ourselves in a way that is safe for Colorado and for folks as well. We've also taken additional steps with regards to the homeless. We passed out a letter that I sent just a few days ago to the hotel and motel operators. We feel very strongly that there should not be mass sites to house people. That's a very dangerous public health situation. It should be distributed as much as possible. We are willing to use the Colorado National Guard to support the work of the cities in those facilities, and many cities across our state are working with motels to be able to provide non-crowded temporary housing to prevent outbreaks among another vulnerable population. Colorado so far, because we're staying at home, I think like a lot of other states, we are seeing a leveling off of people admitted to hospitals. We hope of deaths, but we still have difficult days ahead. And the more of a leveling off we see, the greater the degree of confidence there will be, and the more ambitious the timetable will be about being able to reintegrate our ability to move around and engage in economic activity and reopen, as is the goal, with as quickly as we possibly can in the state of Colorado. I want to thank all of you for staying home, except when you absolutely need to go out. Usually I'm somebody who cheers the sunshine and good weather. I was a little worried Saturday. The weather was nice, and there were reports that people were going out a bit more than we would like. But we're blessed, and we're blessed to have very cold, snowy, rainy weather now. So people are more likely to stay in yesterday, today, tomorrow. That really is a blessing, because we know that when there's less opportunities to recreate outside, Coloradans are better at resisting that temptation. And with regard to our amazing mountains, our trails, keep in mind that our wonderful mountains, our world-class resort areas will be here long after we're gone, and we'll be able to enjoy them all again soon enough. But let's give them a little bit of a break during this time. Recreate when you need to walk and stay in your own community, stay close to home. You need to walk your dog, you walk your dog. But this is not a vacation, it's not a holiday. It's a pandemic. Coloradans are rising to the challenge. Just as I know kids across Colorado will rise to the challenge of making masks that make this a little bit more acceptable and less traumatic for children across our state. And responsible Coloradans across the state are rising to the challenge of the situation and staying at home. And we really are starting to see the impact of that on the trajectory of this virus in Colorado, which is really really exciting. It's about the lives saved. Far less people are dying than some of the models that showed tens of thousands of people, if no action was taken, that would have been afflicted by this virus. And we look at areas of the world that we see about on national television that took some of these steps a little bit too late, just a little bit too late, a little bit later than we did. And there are just tragic consequences. But we need to keep it up. We need to keep it up. The more that we're able to stay at home, the sooner we can get to be able to return to work and limited social activity and have the framework in place to do that in a safer way. And I want to thank all of you for doing that. And if you're interested in the masks, it's coloradomaskcontest.org on the Colorado Creative Industries website. I look forward to supporting your ideas, and I look forward to working with our own kids tonight to make my white mask a little bit more interesting. With that, we'll be happy to take questions. Stefan?
Governor, we're less than 2 weeks away from your 26th of April deadline. A lot of people want to know how that rollout is going to look. Does that mean that on the 26th they can start planning to go back to work on the 27th? What are you seeing behind the scenes as to how that may roll
So
out?
we'll have the details on that before the 26th, and that would mean we're not talking about 10 p.m. on the 25th. We're talking about a few days before the 26th. So when we have that, that will be presented. It'll be a few days before, and folks will know exactly what's going and what's not going. I believe I've set expectations in previous press conferences. That doesn't mean that bars will be open or restaurants will be full. There's a number of additional social distancing things that we'll need to do. But as a whole, we need to find a way where people are able to support themselves and go about their lives in a more normal way. Yes, Mary?
Yes, Governor, the number of outbreaks at non-hospital healthcare facilities is now over 75 and growing rapidly. What are you doing to address this? The outbreak has gotten worse. Even in the last week, it's almost doubled. So limiting visitors obviously is not enough. Are you considering treating them more like hospitals with testing and PPE?
We are absolutely, as part of the strategy, and which was the topic of a call with governors as well, looking at some of the practices around making sure that we can do more testing at sites that serve our most vulnerable population. In the meantime, these isolation protocols are similar there as they are for us, which means that we need to make sure that we have less visitation. There's heavily restricted visitation. Employees need to be checked with regard to their temperature, just as we do at our own emergency operations center. And these were some of the first steps that we took. If you recall, well before the masks or the stay-at-home or any of that, we took action to protect our most vulnerable, and we're continuing to work with stakeholders to up the bar on that. The need is great. The virus has a much worse trajectory among Coloradans that are in their 70s and 80s. And we need to take everything we can to address them. Sadly, it's not surprising that we see a higher fatality rate at nursing homes. It's not just here in Colorado. It's not just in our country. It's across the world. Because we know that many of our most vulnerable residents live at long-term care facilities, CDPHE and local health departments are working closely with facilities to proactively implement infection control strategies and also respond to cases and exposures within a facility, for instance, using strategies if there's a wing in a facility, shutting off that wing that has an infection, other strategies like that on a site-specific basis. Telephone question?
Yes, Governor Polis, John Frank here from the Colorado Sun. On Wednesday, your administration will release more data on the nursing home cases. And I'm wondering when you first got this data on the nursing home facility infections and what action you took. How long have you been looking at these numbers, and what have you done about them?
So it's a similar question to the last one. It was about nursing homes. Sadly, what we see, not just here in Colorado, but everywhere, is that people in their 70s and 80s are more vulnerable. Now, that applies to people in their 70s and 80s, whether they live in a nursing home or whether they live at home themselves. It's easier for them to isolate. My parents are in their 70s. They live at home. They are and have been self-isolating for a couple weeks now, having bringing over groceries and not going out for shopping or for any purpose. But others live in nursing homes, and so we have the same issue around that, because there's staff that goes to the nursing home every day, especially seniors that need support to be able to live. That's why some of the very first protections we put in place, knowing that this virus disproportionately affected the elderly, were the protocols around significantly facing down visitation and for doing well checks of the workers at those facilities. Additional steps will be taken with regard to, as we open, making sure that we do our best to keep those facilities safe because of the higher fatality rate and higher incidence of hospitalization of individuals that are living in a group setting that are particularly vulnerable.
Governor, back to the JBS issue, if you would. I've got several questions from employees, if you would indulge me. First, closing for a period of time. Can you be more specific?
It will be closed long enough that folks can be tested, and it will be a safe environment before they go back to work.
Days, weeks?
Well, as long as it takes. We hope it's days. I think we have to make sure that people are tested and that it's safe, and that then they're able to go back to work. So whether that's 2 days or 2 weeks, that's what they're going to do. The JBS is committed to keeping their employees safe.
And Governor, this comes from frustrated employees. They want to know, were managers of JBS negligent at a time when you were calling for social distancing? They continue to operate and place employees at risk.
I don't have any firsthand knowledge of that. There is an outbreak there, so clearly one has occurred, and our priority is going to be to make sure that we can restore this critical part of our national food security, which is also an important part of the livelihood of our ranchers as well as important consumers, as quickly as possible, and as quickly as we can ensure the employees that it's a safe environment to return to, and that includes testing the employees.
Final question, you talked about outbreak there. Do we know if the meat has any potential of being contaminated by employees who have tested positive?
There's no evidence at all that there's any risk to consumers. It's an issue within the plant that employees and others in the supply chain might have been exposed to the virus and may have contracted the virus. Telephone question?
Thank you, sir.
This is Vinny Del Giudice from Bloomberg in Denver. Hello. Regarding Greeley, the JBS plant, and other meatpacking plants across Colorado, what type of longer-term reforms are being considered to prevent problems like this occurring again in general beyond COVID? And secondly, can you give us a readout on the White House press, the White House call with governors today, and whether or not you felt any pressure to reopen the state or other states, governors felt that, and what kind of target was the White House talking about? Thank you very much.
Yeah, the White House has not laid out a target date yet. I think that May 1st is still the operational date. Colorado hopes to beat that by a couple days. We'll be guided by the data. The topic of the call was more around some of the testing work. Colorado is in the forefront of working to scale up testing as part of that return to normal. The different kinds of testing, the different kinds of support that can be provided is very important. You asked about what was your question about the JBS plant?
Am I still open?
Yeah, go ahead. What was your question about JBS?
Yes, thank you very much. Are you looking at longer-term reforms that JBS and the beef industry in general will put this or other things?
So here's what's, no matter what a plant does, there's all kinds of different production facilities, factories in Colorado. The ones that are not in critical industries, they're temporarily closed. So people ask, why was a plant like JBS open until recently? It's because it's in food. Everything in ag, in food, in energy, in these critical sectors, they're still going. So for us, this is a learning experience to find out what we can do better as we move towards an overall economic reopening. The way that this would look is more of a targeted response. Again, unfortunately, the virus will still be with us after we reopen, and despite this efforts to tamp it down, the spread will slow, but it will still exist in our state. We're realistic about that. We don't think the prospect of eliminating it is a realistic one in our country or in our state. The prospect of reducing the spread of it, slowing down the spread, halting the number of outbreaks, that's realistic, protecting our nursing homes and vulnerable populations. So as our state reopens, unfortunately and tragically, there will likely be site-specific outbreaks. It doesn't have to be in food processing. It could be in any sector. It could be at a furniture factory. It could be at a pet food factory. It doesn't matter. Wherever there is one, then what will happen is, instead of the entire economy and entire state quarantining, the folks associated with that outbreak will be tested and quarantined. So it's that targeted approach that, rather than cause this massive economic devastation across everybody and prevent people from earning a livelihood, there would be a targeted response wherever that is. So this kind of work with JPS is an example of a targeted response that involves a site-specific closure for as short as possible a period of time. We're, of course, prioritizing because of its role in national food security and the National Guard. The Vice President has said that they're actually giving us tests and personal protection equipment for that facility because of its importance. But that will be a similar concept that will be applied in the future once the economy is open to future site-specific outbreaks in any industry.
Governor, can you talk a little bit more about these specific steps that you're going to take to try and aid nursing homes and how soon those are going to happen? And also, why not send the National Guard in to help with testing at those facilities? You're talking about doing it at JBS, but these are places that are seeing, dozens of deaths.
Oh, if the Colorado National Guard can help, we'd be happy to. They support large logistical operations. Testing is much easier at most nursing homes. They are organized, they live there. There are some very large ones, but many of them are dozens or hundreds of people. There might be some that are thousands, but keep in mind that JBS it's going to be 5,000 tests. If there are nursing homes of that size in our state, there's only a few. Most are much smaller. So the logistical challenges are small. It's really about the testing supplies and equipment. We talked about that on the call with the Vice President today, making sure that we can up the bar on that. There are other governors that are also looking at this. We're not alone. In what additional steps can we take other than just taking temperatures and making sure that people in that workforce aren't coming to work sick? This is, there's no question that as we have community spread of the virus, nursing homes are still part of our community. So there's no way that they can be completely cut off from every other part of our community. They are part of the supply chain. People deliver packages there. People deliver food there. People prepare food there. Workers come to work and support those staff. So it's about the additional steps that we can take to reduce their risks. And again, the steps that we took very early on have had a very positive impact on preventing more nursing homes from having this contagion spread. But they are an environment where people live together, where people work, and we would treat them like other sites with a particular emphasis on protecting them because of their high at-risk residents.
Are you going to send more testing to these facilities? Is that what you're saying?
Well, there are going to be more testing across the entire economy. That's rapidly scaling. We absolutely support scaling up testing along with our medical partners at nursing facilities, and that includes for workers as well as for people who are symptomatic.
Governor, what do you, the data you showed us today shows a disproportionate impact on the Black community, both in terms of total cases and deaths from the coronavirus. To what do you attribute this disproportionality, and what are you going to do about it?
Well, that we would have to leave to scientists and those who study this data. I would indicate it is similar to what has been seen in other states, not as great an extent of a disparity, Alex, but we have seen even greater disparities, for instance, in Louisiana. Again, scientists will comment on what the meaning is. You've probably heard things similar to me, that it could be a proxy for economic disparities. It could be a proxy for health. There's a number of things that could be proxy for with regard to why it's disproportionately impacting communities of color.
And what's your administration doing about this then?
Well, we care about everybody. I mean, we are all together here as a state. So, I mean, there can't be you can't stop it I mean, people live in integrated communities. I mean, You can't say we're stopping it for Hispanics, but not for white people, or for blacks and not Hispanics. I mean, the reason to stay at home is for everybody. That drives down the infection rates across the board for black people, for Hispanic people, for white people, for Asian people. There's no question that the more that we can stay at home, the more people, the more lives we save for people of all races. And again, as for what it means, you should talk to health experts and others who would have been. I'm just, what the things I've heard is that it's likely a proxy for socioeconomic issues, which obviously there's no short-term solution for that. It's part of a broader problem that our country has with regard to extreme income disparities. And then a proxy for health and behavior. So it means things like diet, it means things like asthma, it means things like other health conditions like diabetes that disproportionately impact people of color.
Governor, tonight the Denver City Council will vote on a proclamation that's urging you to use your emergency powers to cancel rent and mortgage payments for those impacted by this pandemic. Is this something that you would consider doing soon? And if not, would you revisit this later if the stay-at-home order is extended?
Well, of course, the state, no governor, no president has the legal ability to suspend the sanctity of contract law. It's common law. No state has done that. What we want to do in Colorado, what I have done, is really make sure that we take the strongest steps of any governor to help protect renters. And that means using our legal authority, the full weight of it, on behalf of renters, and I encourage the council members of Denver and other cities to join with the state in making rental assistance more widely available during this time. I've already issued an executive order directing our Department of Local Affairs to work with property owners and landlords to avoid removing or executing eviction procedures against tenants or mobile homeowners without cause. And that means if just because they haven't paid, nobody should be evicted. And I've also worked closely with utilities to prevent shutoffs for non-payment, and we've made $3 million available through DOLA for rent support for people struggling to keep up with our bills. So Colorado will remain in the forefront of states with regard to protecting tenants and renters. Telephone question?
Governor Joseph George here. You announced you'll soon be releasing the hospitalization recovery data.
Yes.
I know you don't have it today, but I'm curious if you could talk to any general trends you're hearing. Are the majority of people currently hospitalized, or have they been released? A few weeks ago, you said the average hospital stay was around 20 days. Is that still true?
I don't know if I think that might have been not average overall. That might have been average before death. Some people require hospitalization only for a few days. The ones who need ventilation or significant treatment, and that ultimately we lose some of, those are those longer term residents. So we'll get more transparency into that. I can tell you overall, we're doing fine with regard to hospital capacity. There's kind of a couple things that are happening there. One is the regular non-COVID traffic to hospitals is down in two ways. One, because we've halted elective procedures. All of those hospital beds associated with elective, and that's elective broadly. I mean, people hear elective, they think it's a nose job. That's a small teeny piece of what we're talking about. It's knee replacements, it's for back surgery. It's all of these things that can be put off without a risk to the patient. So I mean, we got to get them going as soon as we can. Don't just think of them as elective in the sense that they're frivolous or cosmetic, even though they're somebody's choice. Many of them are medically important. They just can be delayed. So those have been put off. And then also a couple other things. There's obviously with the stay-at-home order, there's less car crashes. There's also less contagion of the flu and other bacterial infections that sometimes require hospitalization. So because of the non-COVID piece decreasing, we feel very good about where we are with regard to hospital capacity to meet the need. The COVID patients, we'll have a lot of transparency in who's being released, how long they're there, all of that in the coming days. But we're very grateful that because of the stay-at-home and because of people's decisions and because of the delay in elective surgeries, there's a lot less non-COVID patients right now too. I also want to take this occasion to make sure that hospitals have indicated that they've seen a decline in non-COVID patients, and it could include some that should be in the hospital. So I mean, if you're having chest pains or symptoms that normally you would call your hospital, don't be afraid just because COVID is there to get the medical help you need. That's a very important message. I mean, seeing that decline of non-COVID people in hospitals might even be too sharp for what it should be. I mean, of course, it's the people who delayed elective surgery. Of course, it's people who weren't in car accidents. But if you think you need hospitalization because of a non-COVID symptom, and you might have a potential stroke or heart attack, please, call 911. Do what you normally would do. Don't be afraid to seek medical treatment, especially if it's a condition that needs to be addressed. So I want to make sure that message is there too, and that people just aren't willfully delaying their non-COVID cases, even though they might be conditions that require immediate attention. Yes?
The president this morning disputed the idea that it's solely up to governors to decide when to reopen the states, and implied that the feds and the president himself has some role in that. Whose decision is it whether to reopen Colorado, and what input will you get from the White House on that?
Like many people, I was surprised to see that not in the form of a formal comment, but in the form of a tweet. I don't think the tweets are definitive word from the executive branch. There's been cases where they've been tweeted things out that are not necessarily direct orders of the president. So I don't know what weight that's supposed to carry. As a matter of course, many states are on different schedules. Some have extreme social distancing that is in place longer than us, some shorter than us. Many will change based on data. I'm not sure exactly what the president meant with that. I would say that we would welcome a more of a regional or national approach to timing. We border different states that have different policies. We border different states that have different trajectories of the infection. So we do worry about a situation where we do a good job clearing it out from Colorado, and then we worry about, because states don't control their own borders, that's also important to know, interstate commerce, we don't get to say who comes and who goes from our state. Even if somehow we're able to contain it better here, people would come in from Texas, Nebraska, New Mexico, Utah, other states, and unless they're in about the same place we are, it could make it worse, or vice versa, Coloradans traveling to other states. So I don't know what that meant, but I do hope that there is a focus on better national uniformity about how we can combat this, because we do have a lot of commerce and travel between our states, just as we do within our state.
Governor, regarding your letter to hotel and motel owners, I know that there have been some groups who have called for you to commandeer vacant units and utilize your power to do that. Is that something that you would, that is some action that you might be willing to take?
Well, I think this is, I think what I put in my letter, as I said, it's a match made in heaven. There's empty rooms and hotel operators that are desperate for revenue because there's no one traveling. I mean, many have just closed, a few are, nominally open. And then on the other hand, there's a bunch of potential guests that do pay, by the way. I mean, the city is paying for them. Aurora, Colorado Springs, Denver. So it's really an opportunity to save lives, an opportunity to help our hotels stay in business, an opportunity to help contain the public health threats of coronavirus in our state. So I know that those are happening. There are more and more of those contracts being reached, and that's a very good thing. It's a good thing for the homeless. It's a good thing for public health because the homeless don't operate in isolation. And it's also a good thing for our small businesses in the lodging industry.
Governor, one more question for you. You talked about crossing the threshold of 300. Obviously, that's a very sad moment and a large number, but perspective from you 4 weeks ago when you first talked to us, if you would have said we're at 300 at this point, would that be a number you would say is an accomplishment for the state? Is it more than you thought? And then the second part on the JBS issue, are you concerned about the meat supply for the state, for restaurants, for stores, and for fast food stores?
So we've seen, let me ask just the second one first. We've seen similar outbreaks in South Dakota. Meat plant was closed. I think there's one under watch in Pennsylvania that might have been closed as well. I'm not worried about the disruption in the supply chain because these are short-term closures. If these lasted many weeks or months, there would be significant damage to our economy, to our ranchers, and to consumers. I'm confident that by prioritizing our national food security and getting these plants open as soon as possible, that there will be no disruptions to the national food supply. 300 is a reflection point. Each death is a tragedy, and at the same time, we look at what's happening in places like New York City, which, by the way, New York City has a population about only about 50% greater than Colorado, but thousands of victims who have succumbed to the virus. Because we acted quickly, because we acted boldly, because Coloradans are doing a good job staying at home, first and foremost, we have just over 300 deaths, and that is what it is. Each death is a tragedy, but also in this environment is a tragic indication of our success in Colorado in helping to prevent some of those worst case scenarios with thousands and tens of thousands of deaths. I would also add that there's still many difficult days ahead, and folks are going to continue to succumb to this virus, and we need to do our best to keep up the staying at home and wearing masks when we're out. Telephone, please.
Governor, this is Kara Mason from the Sentinel in Aurora. This weekend, the New York Times reported a thorough timeline of when some federal officials presumed an imminent threat from the virus and for how long they were trying to prompt the Trump administration to act. As you know, those were delayed time and time again. Did any federal entity approach the state with those concerns early on? And if so, when?
So I might not have heard the first part. Did the federal government approach us with concerns about what?
With the virus. The New York Times did a pretty thorough report over the weekend about the timeline of when some people knew and how long they knew. And my question is if anybody approached the state early on.
Not that I know of. We identified our first case about a month and 5 days ago, was the first case in Colorado. Our scientists and epidemiologists now believe that it was already here before we identified our first case, and there were likely people with it already at that time. When the numbers are small, and because it presents like pneumonia, and before the testing was done, before people knew it was here, there were already people catching it at that point. We know that it is now spread further. The community spread in counties like Eagle County and Pitkin County early on, along with the community spread in places like Denver and Weld County, which the best action to take if people are successful staying at home, it will significantly reduce that. But I'm not aware of any warnings to us to take actions prior to the actions that we took. And in fact, we took our actions ahead of national action to encourage those. So we took actions closing down the ski resorts, which was particularly painful as a native Coloradan and somebody who skied since I was 4 years old, and whose family was set to go skiing the following weekend, as many of you were. That was, of course, extremely painful because it's such an iconic Colorado concept. And then, of course, we also took the predictive steps around nursing homes, which again have saved tons of lives by acting very early on getting those isolation protocols in place, delaying the elective surgeries, closing bars and restaurants, etc. So those were all done ahead of national guidance to do those things.
One more from the room, one more from the phone. Governor, is the subtext of your letter to the hotels and motels that you're disappointed in the fact that there's been no small number of these businesses that have passed up the opportunity to house the unhoused temporarily? What do you make of their decisions?
Well, look, it's going to be a long time till the lodging industry comes back, and if you want to stay in business and be there when you come back, you should pursue this opportunity to provide some housing on a short-term basis. We all worry about our tourism industry. We worry about our lodging industry, our hospitality industry. Even after these extreme social distancing measures roll off, travel is not likely to return to the pre-virus norm until there's a vaccine or a cure. So if you're in it for the long haul, if you want to be able to maintain the viability of your businesses, I think it's very important that our hotels and lodging community take every opportunity to pursue these short-term opportunities for revenue that can also contribute to protecting the public health. One more on the telephone.
Governor Polis, this is Lori Lizarraga with 9 News. I have a few questions that are going back to that nursing home outbreak that we're hearing more and more about. We know the virus is spreading rampantly in senior living facilities, and as you mentioned, ending visitation happened very early. So I have a few questions here. What do you feel happened, and is the state going to do more to ensure that those facilities are following rules?
Yeah, we want to do everything we can. We don't have specific information that they were not following rules or violating the guidance. But we do want to up the bar on making sure that they are following the guidance and that they are limiting visitation, that they are checking the staff as they come to work for temperatures and symptoms. We expect to work with them to expand testing at those facilities as in the coming weeks and continue to take steps to protect the most vulnerable population. As I said, we just passed 300 deaths in Colorado. If we had failed to act early with regard to nursing homes and senior care facilities, that number could be in the thousands in that one area alone, because outbreaks in, 5 times as many facilities likely would have produced, 10 times as many deaths, if I'm doing my math right, because about half the victims or so, a little under half, are folks who live in those kinds of facilities that are subject to this kind of outbreak. So these steps are critical. Each of the communities is doing their best. We will certainly make sure to do what we can on the enforcement side to make sure that they are, as well as making other resources available to help protect our most vulnerable.
Do they have enough PPE?
What?
Do those facilities have enough PPE, and are there plans to get them more if they need it?
It's on a facility by facility basis. I don't. They're not all run by the. There's independent ones. There's some that are run that has changed. Some have PPE. Some don't. They are a priority. Medical personnel, those that are giving care to people with COVID in hospitals, are the top priority for personal protection equipment. And then the next tier are those that work with our most vulnerable population and those that encounter a lot of people in our critical businesses like grocery stores and other areas. That's our next priority for personal protective equipment. One more from the room.
Governor, can I ask you on behalf of small businesses that may be listening, we know the 26th date. Some people, though, wonder if they're going to be able to come back ever, even after the 26th. What can they do besides keep up the good spirit and make a mask? What can they do right now to ensure that whatever you can do as your administration, you are going to do everything they can, that not 80% come back, but 100% come back?
So certainly participate if you're eligible in the Paycheck Protection Program. That is the federal program that extends 2.5 months of your payroll costs to you as a small or medium-sized business. Talk to your bankers, get that application in. It's very important. Really everybody who's affected should do that for your small business. It gives you 2.5 months of payroll protection. You also should be or are getting your $1,200, $2,400 per couple, $500 per kid. That's another piece of it. And then as we come back, figure out how you can adapt to the new way the world looks, meaning that customers may want things increasingly like curbside delivery. They may want the ability to shop remotely. They may want to do things in different ways. Even as we're open, just keep in mind the consumer behavior also is likely to change. So how can you adapt your business to that new need and to that new form of consumer behavior? I think businesses that get ahead of the curve on that will do better, and businesses that want to go back to doing it exactly the way they did do it without making any changes or accommodations for consumer behavior are likely to suffer and lose customers to those who are really embracing the new forms of consumer behavior. I think for small businesses, certainly like making sure your employees are wearing masks, that's very important for encouraging consumer confidence, right? Consumers are going to say, oh, in this store they're wearing masks, in this one they're not. I'm going to go to the one where they're wearing masks. So it's a very simple form of what impacts your bottom line, what impacts consumer behavior. There's a strong incentive to be a leader for you in embracing everything you can to show that you're protecting your own consumers in your business. I'll take one more from the room. Yeah, last question.
Governor, coming into our newsroom from viewers, and it has to do with your decision coming up later this month, is there a tipping point where the economic consequences outweigh the health benefits of your stay-at-home order and the social distancing orders?
Yeah, so we're looking at the data every day to get the economy open as soon as is possible in a way that won't overwhelm our healthcare system and capacity. What the scenario that Colorado was worried about, that other places across the world have reached, is one in which the ability of the healthcare system to save people who could be saved is breached, meaning they literally don't have enough oxygen or ventilators to save people that could otherwise be saved. Not everybody who contracts this virus is going to make it, but we want to give every Coloradan a fighting chance, meaning we want to make sure there's a bed and oxygen there, and many will recover, not all, but many will. So we want to make sure that we're at a point with the capacity on the healthcare side that while the virus will still be with us, and people will still have to take steps to engage in social distancing, that we're able to earn a living as quickly as possible. And I remain confident that we can do that a few days ahead of the national. Joining us. If you'd like to design a mask, you can do that at coloradomaskcontest.org. Look forward to seeing your creativity, and I very much look forward to going through the figures about who's been released and how they've been released from hospitals and the net new hospital additions very shortly as that information is online and becomes available, as well as the additional demographics about who's being impacted. Thank you all. Stay at home. Stay safe.
Colorado Governor Jared Polis wrapping up about 50 minutes of comments on this Monday, April 13th, talking about the state and COVID-19. In it, a lot of statistics, including a lot of questions about some of the larger facilities, nursing homes, healthcare facilities, and the JBS food processing plant up in Weld County, where the governor alluded to 2 or 3 workers there who have died. And when he did that, he mentioned that there are now over 300 deaths in Colorado. The official total yesterday in the 4 o'clock briefing from CDPHE had the state at 290. We're less than 3 hours away now from getting today's update, but obviously it is headed over 300 victims now in the state of Colorado. Talking about that JBS plant, trying to get it open as far as sanitization, when they can reopen, has a lot to do with PPE and containment. Nursing homes and healthcare facilities, he referred to that as a case-by-case